Okay. All right. Okay, everybody. So phones away, and we're going to give our attention this morning to our guest speaker. This is John Kemet Shabazz, and he is the national chairman for the Blackunity Coalition, which where was it before it was here?
It was actually in Charleston.
In Charleston. But in 2013, you moved it to Morgantown.
Well, we started in 2007 in Charleston, but in 2011,
11. Okay.
we brought it to Morgantown.
Okay. So he's going to tell you a little bit about his background, but John was appointed to the Black Lawyers Association for Justice in the Megan Williams hate crimes case, which he might talk a little bit about. It was a pretty huge thing here in West Virginia, 2007, and he helped lead the march against hate crimes in Charleston that same year, 2007. The reason that he is speaking to you today is when we began this project, I had reached out to him, and he has actually helped put you in contact with some of the people who have agreed to be interviewed for this project, because he himself has gathered some background and materials, and he has been documenting Black experience in West Virginia for some time now. So I'm going to let him talk to you about that without further ado. When you have problems, and you will, just look at me and I'll help you out here. Okay?
Okay. How's everybody doing today? My name is John Kemet Shabazz, as Mary Kate indicated. I've been the national chairman of the West Virginia Black Unity Coalition since 2007. We started out in Charleston, and in 2011 we moved to Morgantown, and I assigned my god sister LaWanna Logan as our national chief of staff, recognizing at that time that we needed a woman to balance off the energy in Black Unity Coalition. So I want to go into some additional background in terms of my background. I was born in Fairmont in 1963, and my grandparents got a position in the National Association Church of God campgrounds at West Middlesex, Pennsylvania. So I started school in West Middlesex, Pennsylvania, and it's in northwestern Pennsylvania, just outside of Youngstown, Ohio. I bring that up because I have a background that includes West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania, okay? And at this time, I'd like to ask, by a show of hands, those people that were born in West Virginia, that identify with West Virginia. We got one person? Rest of everybody else?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's so unusual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, having a cross-state background allows me to be able to identify with those people that are born in West Virginia and those people that come to the state from outside of the state. Okay, so today, if you just bear with me, I'm going to share with you my experience on why Black people should be documenting their own history. And it actually came off as an offshoot of the work that I was doing with Mary Kay. I like to refer to it as cross-community work, because I see that your instructor, she has her own distinct agency, and I like to bring my distinct agency as well. So when she contacted me about doing this, I said, well, let me talk to my people and see what they say. Let me talk to my contacts. Most of the contacts were all right with doing this. Okay, they found a need to document the history of Black people within West Virginia. However, there was one person that told me, John, you're getting distracted here. We have a history here in this state where Black people, there's been a violation of trust with white people, and so you should, she tells me that I should be focused more on reparations and not focus on working with white people collecting data, or non-Black people collecting data. And I had to take this under advisement, okay? And when I say take it under advisement, I have a historical background where I study and research. I'm an Afrocentric scholar. So the Afrocentric scholarship background in me, when I say Afrocentric scholar, Afrocentrism was a school of learning which Black scholars developed, I'd say in the 60s, as a pushback against what they perceived as the omission of black history from Western education or European-centered education. So I had this background. So when she put me on notice with this, I found it necessary to interview Mary Kay to give a full and complete, meaning I found it necessary to interview her because there was a dissenting view, okay? And I wanted to make sure we got that on the record to be able to make it a full, make it complete, okay? So here we are, her and I have the interview, but during the interview, and maybe now would be a good time to show that interview. Okay, let's stop here and show the interview.
We're not going to show the whole thing because it's 17 minutes long,
right.
But we are going to show you a clip of it. You'll recognize the room.
An important excerpt.
These are the joyful days before the computer problem.
I'm going to stand over here while this
might suggest that you do bring somebody black on to be able to assist you with it, because first up right off the top, I think I'm telling you that for the most part there is suspicion of Caucasians coming in and documenting their history.
Sure.
And I can give you one quick example of that right here at home with Armand and Gillian, with real quickly, with what now Connie Rice did. Have you seen this book?
You told me about it. I have not seen it.
So you should know about it, right? She did the research for this. It's actually a good book. I found it very informative. She dropped some names that I didn't know about, and some of the names she dropped was Senator Wakeman E. Willie and George Dorsey, of which she identified both of these people as paternalistic slaveholders. And I took issue with that. While supporting the book and the work that she did, I took issue with the fact that I think most black people take issue with the fact that she alluded to paternalistic slavery. And I reject that. While accepting her book as being documentary work, I reject it, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that...
You reject that she mentioned them in the book, you mean?
Well, I reject that she referred to Wakeman T. Willie and George Dorsey as paternalistic slaveholders. Now, from her perspective, there may be such a thing as paternalistic slaveholders. Because I happened to see Bobby Seale years ago at Fairmont State, and he made the statement that in his generation, they were teaching that black people like slavery. They stood out on the stoop and they played the banjo, and it was once they got into black studies, it was part of the major reason black studies came across is because most of the white teachers were teaching, they were covering for slavery. Yeah. And this is one of the concerns that some of the people have, is that they would be covers, you know what I mean?
And so one of the things about this project is we are not taking these interviews and doing anything with them. Besides, here was the interview, we recorded it, it goes into the archives. We're not writing a book with it. We're not synthesizing all of them and putting them together into any kind of history. We're not doing that.
Okay. Now, that's an important piece here, because this is where we started out in terms of why black people should archive their own histories, okay? To be more stronger about this, okay, we know today is Tuesday. Next week we're going to be celebrating Columbus Day. And Columbus really starts off the whole idea of colonialism and taking and robbing away from the indigenous people of this land. And if they could speak for themselves, I bet you that they wouldn't call Columbus a hero. But here in the United States, we're still celebrating Columbus Day, okay? And I tell you that this is more information that tells us that we should be documenting our own history. And there's a whole slew of information speaking for and against Columbus. His history out there. Now, we have a history professor here. We have some. His history today even is a little shrouded, is it not? We really don't have a clear picture of who and what Columbus is, okay? So, given that, given what I had learned in school about Columbus, because I was told Columbus, how many of us were told that Columbus discovered America? Let me show a hand. That's everybody in the room. But we call that de facto, a de facto fact, meaning that it's not really a fact, but it's information that is made effect for all practical purposes. And what was the practical purpose? Okay, Columbus actually had took he actually is an invader, and those that came after him would be considered as invaders too, to the indigenous people. And you know, I'm talking about this, but I'm giving you facts, and I'm also giving you quick conclusions on it too. So bear with me on it, okay? Now, Columbus comes over in 1492, okay? Ironically, 1492 is also the date that the Moors, North Africans that crossed over into Spain in 1311? No, hold on, let me make sure I get this. 711, they crossed over into Spain and they ruled Europe for a 700-year period. Now, as a child coming through the public educational school system, the Moorish history was also something that was omitted. I didn't get that. How many of us got the Moorish history in school? Did we get the Moorish history? I didn't get it. And by the time I was, I'd say, 25 years old, I was introduced to the Moorish history. And I was a little angry that my school teachers didn't let me know about the North Africans who were skilled, who were intelligent. Being a black person myself, that's some information that I want to be able to have, okay? However, in the public school system, and this probably is an indictment against the public school system from my point of view. The public school system at that particular time, when I was coming up in the mid-70s, did not teach us on Moorish history. We did not learn anything about African civilizations. We did not learn about Egyptian civilization, known as Kemet, my middle name. I took that from the indigenous word for Egypt, which is Kemet. We didn't get any of that. And what we got was that our history started out in Jamestown at 1619, okay, when captured Africans had been brought from the west coast of Africa to Jamestown at that particular time for the purpose of, initially they were called indentured servants, okay, along with other people. But then later we find that the laws were changed to permit slavery, okay? And when I say the laws were changed, it's a natural law that you shouldn't enslave a man, okay? We know that peoples warred against one another, and if one tribe won over another tribe, it's natural that the winning tribe is going to make the losing tribe, the winning tribe is going to have more privileges than the losing tribe. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to enslave that person, though, okay? And so we, now we're at 1619 with Jamestown, but ironically, and I'm jumping around here on my chronology, ironically, in 1611, the King James Version of the Bible appears, okay? Now we got to talk about that, and there are some questions about that because we as black people are still debating this, whether or not the Bible is good for us. Because the Bible, it looks clearly that the Bible was used as a tool to trick the African and the Native American, of which I have both African heritage and indigenous heritage as well. It was used as a tool to trick the indigenous people out of their land. So I guess it was easy to do this because many of the indigenous people, they are spiritual. You know, you heard about the Native Americans believing in the great wind and the Africans. So by us being spiritual people, someone could come along with a book and say, hey, this is God right here. Reading this book and study this is how you get to God. So many of the indigenous people went for that, okay? What happens is we have to reinterpret a colonial interpretation of the King James Bible. On its face, I tell people all the time, on its face it says the King James Bible. So this is a reinterpretation of what initially may have been an indigenous people's story. All the way, because the Old Testament, if you look at the Old Testament primarily is an African story. When you get to the New Testament, you see books like Mark. You see English names, Mark, Luke, but in the Old Testament, you don't see those names, okay? Now, and I bring you this again to bring us up to the point why we should be documenting our own history, because there's a difference in perspectives, okay? It might be the perspective of one, for instance, I talked about the Native American, but how would the African who was captured and enslaved, everybody wouldn't be so quick to forgive what happened to them. And part of their healing might be to want to fight back. Part of the healing of going through a situation like that would be to fight back. For instance, I bring up Nat Turner. Nat Turner, his insurrection went down in Southampton, Virginia. He was a slave, but he was a preacher. And his master, he liked his master. His master was a nice master. I tell the story, and it's kind of hard, but I got to tell the story to you. When it came time, Nat Turner had received a vision where he seen signs in the sky. He was a prophet, reading the Bible. And reportedly, something told him that he would have to fight to free his people from this condition. Okay, even though he was living relatively well. He was a preacher, and he was friends with the master. But when he went to the other captured Africans and asked them about making this rebellion, they told him, well, Nat, you need to go ahead on and kill your master first, since he's a nice master. If you kill him, we know you really mean business. Nat Turner went in and killed his nice master. Okay? Then after that, they went from slave plantation to slave plantation, slaughtering, killing people. Okay? And so history, American history, United States history, writes people like Nat Turner off as fanatics. But the condition that he was in, if you were black, you would have to say that Nat Turner is a hero. Now, if you were anything other than black or anything, if you were a European, you might say that Nat Turner is a villain. Okay? But we give Nat Turner his respect, and it's a difference in perspectives, the way that you would look at it. Okay? Also, I want to go further in mentioning Nat Turner. I'd have to also mention John Brown, who, I got to tell you about him because he was a white man that stood up for the rights of black people. He had been out in Kansas with his sons. Not only was he fighting for the rights of black people, him and his family were fighting for the rights of black people. So Brown tries to take over the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry. This is a time when West Virginia was not West Virginia, it was still Virginia at that time. Brown isn't successful, and ironically, the goal was for Brown to rise up and take over the federal arsenal and include those enslaved Africans with him, and that they would set up an independent state. Yes, by taking the federal arsenal, that they would set up an independent state for runaway slaves. Slavery was such a cruel and grand thing that it split the European population in the South. It split the European population in the North. Okay? And the condition of the African American, the black people today, still splits the United States. It's split into the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Both parties, in my view, have exploited the African American condition to their benefit. By making this thing, we're going to make things right for you. We're going to make things better for you. Okay. Now I talked about Brown, and again I'm skipping around here in my chronology, but something else that was very important was the August 20th, 1804 Haitian Revolution. And this is the liberation of the Haitian natives from French colonial power. And that would be, at that time, was Napoleon. It was a humble man that rose up named Toussaint Louverture, and he led his people, along with others, in a rebellion and to secure independence for Haiti. Part of the reason of the Haitian Revolution is one of the reasons why the United States was able to secure the Louisiana Purchase. We learned about this in school. Now, You teachers now, like, if I say something that ain't correct, you're off there, Jim. Okay. But, so we have the Haitian Revolution story, which is something else that was omitted in in Western education. I didn't get that, okay? That was something that I had to study independently. And I've given you 3 examples, so you can't look for public education to give you everything you're supposed to get, okay? As journalists, I would tell you to look at the official story and then do your research, look for correspondences, and look for the story up underneath the official story. Because the official story, more often than not, is there to maintain the established order, you know. And I could tell you about, for instance, just off the cuff, John F. Kennedy, the killing of John F. Kennedy, and pinning it on, what was the fellow that they pinned it on? Oswald, okay? But if you go now, 25 years later, we're going back and watching all that, and we look at that and we say, there's no way. But it still sticks as the established story, even until today. And that's why I believe in having journalists that have a righteous indignation, or fact finders, okay? And some people might say, well, you're forming conclusions. You form your conclusions based upon the facts that you uncover, okay? As a black man, as an African American, I find it necessary to have an understanding of global history, that which is on the record officially, but at the same time, it's necessary to, in certain instances, it would be necessary to challenge and look deeper into the established record. And if you go back in history, you'll find examples where the established record is one thing, but there might be somebody else that says something else. For instance, it had been said that ancient Egypt was a white civilization, that the Greeks came in, and that the Ptolemies, which were the last people that actually to come in, the Greeks were actually the last people to come in and take Egypt, right? However, oftentimes we are left with the print that the Greeks had about ancient Egypt, when there were writers, another white man, Gerald Massey, who wrote on the Light of Egypt, and he came out early and said that no, Egypt was a black civilization, okay? Those of us that were researchers, that we could come along later on and we could take for instance, a white researcher researching and giving us truth on a black civilization, which was against the establishment at that time, because the establishment held down that Egypt was a white civilization, and they stuck with that all the way up until, say, 1974, when it was a great black man from, I gotta say his name because he's never talked about, from Senegal, named Sheikh Anta Diop. He was an anthropologist, a linguist, I can't say the word, but but he had all this mixed background, and he initially was working as an understudy for a Caucasian fellow, but after he had reached a level of expertise, he was able to conduct his own experiments on the bones of the ancient Egyptian mummies, and he was able to go in 1974, him and his assistant, and came with a truckload of books, and proved that the ancient Egyptians were a black civilization, proved that the language came out the interior of Africa, as well as proving that they had high melanin levels. So now the work that Diop did was not a work that was endorsed by the establishment. Diop was on his own. Matter of fact, the great black historian John Henry Clark tells us that it took him 7 years to get one of Diop's books published here in this country. No publisher would publish any of his books. Why? Because, and when we are right here today, where the information that has been uncovered has forced the establishment to change its perspective on Columbus discovering America, which it has refused to do, even until today. I speak before you and say to you, young journalists, it's on you to gather the facts, to be bold, to be strong, to step outside of the box, huh? To be like John Brown. Huh? I mean, you don't have to go out like John Brown went out. But to challenge the establishment, if you know that it's wrong and the facts say different, challenge the establishment. I bring you today, I also have with me, I have the legacy of inequality in West Virginia, racial and economic disparities. And I talk about them because they play on the condition of black people here in the state. And oftentimes, you know, we're 2 or 3%. We're 2 or 3% of the total population in West Virginia. You would think that we had never been here, had never done anything. But I think part of the reason our numbers are so low here in the state is because, I'm going to be clear, is because we have went through a systemic gentrification, and that it's advanced in many ways that we are not able to define. And years and years of colonization, years and years of being on the plantation has put a fear in us, and not in all of us, but many of us, where we can't stand up and say, hey, what was wrong, and until you correct it, you're not going to get any real, genuine love from us. Why? Being on the plantation taught black people to actually love their masters. A black woman would have her own baby taken away from her, but she would be made to take the master's child and put the master's child to her breast and feed the master's child, okay? And years of this type of indoctrination, I want to say it got a percentage of black people, but it hasn't got all. Because when you do these types of things to a people, other things may arise as well, meaning a rebellion to that condition, okay? Now, I want to stay focused, okay? I'm telling you all this, but I want to stay focused on the reasons why black people should tell their own story. It's because white people, I think, have a problem. It convicts. When I say white people, let us say European people, would have a problem with telling the true story of black people because it indicts them. Okay? Yeah. It would make you feel kind of guilty about it. But that's all right. Okay? Because when somebody commits a crime, you go to jail, you feel bad about what you've done. And you work to change yourself. And I can talk about that because I messed up and I spent time in jail, spent time in prison, okay? And I had to learn to articulate myself and speak for myself. Why? Because the European lawyers I had looked at me and was like, buddy, we're just playing a game here. You're really on your own. And once I figured that out, that I was on my own, I had to go and study the law, learn about due process, all the things that you really don't get too much of in the public school system. But now, since I had got myself in trouble, I had to learn how to speak for myself because the lawyers were selling me out. And the lawyers are more often than not are given to you by the establishment. Okay, I'm trying to stick with my presentation guide here, but I told you all that because these are some of the I call this anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence why black people should archive and document their own histories. However, in saying this, if there's no black person on the scene that's interested, if all of us are busy partying and doing whatever we do, and there's nobody on the scene to document black history, the rocks will move. When I say the rocks will move and they'll take care of it, why? Another example would be John Henry, who's right here in West Virginia. I worked under Ed Cabell at the John Henry Museum downtown. Ed told me specifically, rest in peace, Ed, he's gone, but he told me specifically, it wasn't the black people that carried John Henry. It was the white people that carried John Henry. Okay? We didn't tell his story. So what I'm telling you is, yes, what you look like on the outside, whether your nationality, it plays a part in this thing, but we also rise, those are mundane conditions. We can rise above what we look like on the outside and do and fulfill loftier principles, okay? Like justice, peace, equity, freedom. These are lofty principles, and as a student of Ma'at, which is the ancient Egyptian system of justice, law, and order, you, in order to have justice, in order to have peace, you have to have these other principles in place. Justice. You know? Well, I would tell you that because I'm a black person, I'm African American, or more, all these different labels, because why? We have an issue with identity. Yeah. We have an issue with identity largely because we have been up under a period of European colonization. And it is those of us, like myself, I'm aware of it, even the language that we speak. Now, even with European colonization, up under that, we recognize that there was a period of time where the Greeks had to go to Africa. They had to go to Egypt. They had to go to Ethiopia. The people with burnt faces, okay? So the primary knowledge, as far as my understanding goes, as far as being an Afrocentric investigator researcher, comes out of Nile Valley civilization, okay? Yes, Nile Valley civilization. Why? Because as we know, the ancient Egyptians were the parents, or the parents of the knowledge which the Greeks had. Then the Greeks transferred this over to the Romans. And see, it's just now, in public education, what I got, that Greeks were the parents of Western civilization. The impact in which the Egyptians had was omitted, okay? Now, today, most of us know that the Greeks got their civilization from the Egyptians. Most of us know, okay? Now, I got to ask the question, okay? We got some definitions here. What is a pilgrim? Okay? Does anybody know what a pilgrim is? Huh? Nobody want to give it a try? You give it a try.
Was it like mostly just Europeans that came from Europe to America? They were called pilgrims, and they were there at the first Thanksgiving with the Native Americans.
That's what we learned in school.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, and that's sufficient. That's sufficient. Europeans that came over and they Plymouth Rock. Those that landed at Plymouth Rock are generally called the Pilgrims. However, the British had came over and went to Jamestown. Now I found this out in my study. I had to go to the dictionary on pilgrim. Okay. Now, they labeled those that went to the Europeans that came to Plymouth Rock as pilgrims, but the same label doesn't get applied to those that came to Jamestown. And I'm wondering why. Okay. Was Jamestown a different situation than Plymouth Rock? I'm not necessarily sure. But my reason for bringing up the word pilgrim is because one man's pilgrim, and the definition in Webster's for pilgrim, also is a wanderer and one that is on a holy journey. He's a holy traveler. It would be a pilgrim, like I spent time in Islam. So if I wanted to go over to Mecca and make what they call the Hajj, what Malcolm X did, that is a pilgrimage. I'm outside the area. I'm traveling and making a holy pilgrimage to cleanse my soul, to do God's work. Now, so the pilgrim, to me, looks like an offshoot of the word crusader, because the word crusader is a word that came out of the Punic Wars between the various groups there in the Middle East at that particular time, North Africa. So I would say the word pilgrim, to me, and I'm giving a conclusion, but the word pilgrim is a word used to hide the fact that those people that came over were settlers and invaders. to those to those indigenous people. Okay. Now, I have another word here, and that word is immigrant. First we had pilgrims, now we got immigrant. One person's pilgrim could be another person's immigrant. Now, can somebody give me a definition for that? What is an immigrant? Who made that word up? Okay, and for what purpose? I'm gonna give you a little bit of time.
I'll try again. I think what I consider an immigrant is just mostly someone who comes from their country to our country, mostly seeking a better life.
Mm-hmm. See, this guy's pretty good. Those are clean definitions, okay? But, and I hadn't took time to go into Webster's and check out what Webster had to say about the word immigrant. Well, we have Google search engine now, but with the word immigrant, the definition that he gave for immigrant, meaning that someone outside the country comes into the, but I think the United States has added a title, added on to immigrant, meaning that, okay, you could come from outside the country to this country, but if you don't go by a certain process, if you're not processed in the kind of way that the establishment sees that you should be processed, then you are, or you could be called an illegal immigrant. You come from another country to this country, you're an immigrant. Now, I don't perceive myself as an immigrant, okay? And they can, now you could technically say that everybody that came to this country outside of the Native Americans that were already here is an immigrant. But the word immigrant traditionally is a label that sticks to who. When you think about immigrant, you think about illegal immigration, everything that's in the news right now. You think about the Mexicans, huh? Automatically, you think about the Mexicans. They're trying to take the border. And a large part of that is part of programming in the media. We get a heavy dose of that. And when I say the media, we're talking about the news media, all from all different angles, okay? And now, a follow-up to that immigrant is whether might is right. The whole idea of the doctrine of might is right. Might is right would say, okay, in the past, 3 and 3 was 6. But today, your new president says that 3 and 3 is 7. And anyone that says anything different will be shot. The impact of something like that, and this is not to say that that hasn't happened before in the past, okay? This is the de facto state where those who are in the establishment can dictate what is actually right or wrong and use weapons of war to impose that status on anyone. Now, the journalist traditionally has been respected by the powers that be. Yes, the journalist has been respected. The policeman will kind of stop on the journal. When I say this about the journalist, I'm talking about the journalist that is skilled in making observations, asking questions, gathering data, gathering facts. So I think that in your journalism, you also take on a charge, a special charge, to look out for those that are disadvantaged, impoverished, to put the establishment on notice when it's wrong. Because really the journalist, in my mind, the journalist really is gathering facts and making sure that the facts stay in place, okay? Those who are in the position of, or in the establishment, as I told you, they can say 3 and 3 is 6. It was, 3 and 3 is 7. It was 6, but we've changed the rules on that, and we have the military to impose it. It was, I don't know if Patrick Henry was considered a journalist or not. Okay, I learned about him in school, right? But we learned about him running through and saying, the British are coming, the British are coming. He's putting people on notice, okay? But he was considered a statesman, wasn't he? We were,
Not really Jones, but yeah.
yeah. But the work that he did in making people aware, to me, is a form of journalism. Okay, and that's the type of thing that, yeah, that's the type of thing that I admire. Okay, now, getting back to our, and we haven't left it, but getting back to our main theme, again, is why black people should archive and tell their own stories. I've given you several scenarios of anecdotal information, but I always like to give some solutions, okay? And I'm getting toward the end of my presentation here, but in solutions, for this area, I say that appropriation of resources for an African American cultural museum. Now, you know, recently the government put one in Washington, D.C., millions and millions of dollars. And we're thankful for that, okay? Because I think we need to be reminded, and we do need to gather the data, set up a cultural historical museum here in West Virginia. Why? Because we're 2-3% of the population. If we don't tell our own story and tell it in the kind of way that uplifts and puts us in a rightful, and that restores us, people are going to forget about us. I don't see, I'm speaking before an entirely European audience, okay? But that doesn't mean we should stop, okay? We're looking for goodwill beyond the notion of what we look like. So if I come and I look and I say, well, there's no black people. Well, we got to go, and we just got to go in and on truth and ask that the people that don't look like black people do the right thing. John Brown did it, and he's just one of them, and Gerald Massey did it, okay? I would think that if you're in a state such as this, 93% white, 2% black people, I would say, look, there's something not right here. And, you know, we don't really have a voice in the legislature, you know, even though we do have representation there. I'm not necessarily sure that that representation is a representation that is in our best interest. Because if it was in our best interest, and that's not, again, somebody might see this. I know people that are in the legislature, okay? I got friends down there, so don't y'all get mad. But we need to push to the legislature for direct appropriations to us for our upliftment, our habitat, communities, to set up model communities, meaning that we have to learn how to, we have to be restored. So in many ways, we have to learn how to get along with one another again. In many ways, slavery disrupted that. Slavery disrupted the relationship between the black man and the black woman in a brutal way. Okay? Why? I've told you a story where the black woman was brought out and horses strapped to one leg, horses strapped to another leg, and ripped and pulled apart. Then the baby dropped down, and the slave master come out and crush it with his boot in front of all the other black women and men to let everybody know that he held the ultimate power. And this was drenched into the brains, into the systems of black people where they was afraid, fear, terror. Not only did we deal with that, we also dealt with the Ku Klux Klan that rose up after Reconstruction as a way of putting blacks back in their place. Okay. Now I've given you a lot of stuff, and I want you to think about it. Okay. And when you do your journalism, you know, it's important for you to gather the facts and tell truth, and recognize that oftentimes the establishment will overreach, and the journalist has the ability to put the establishment in check. Okay. I talk like this because I had to represent myself in court. Okay, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the ability to do that. Okay, why? Because the lawyers sold me out. They really, I gotta say this. most of the lawyers are officers, not most of them, they all are officers of the court. So I have something against lawyers, and I have some friends that are lawyers. I have to tell them up front, I don't like lawyers, okay? Why? Because for the most part, they represent the interests of the existing status quo to maintain it. Now, in saying that, and I don't know if we had a lawyer that I had respect for who started out working for the prosecutors. I know, I see your time.
You're fine.
Okay. That lawyer that started out working for the prosecutors, district attorney out in L.A., he held those cases, but then he started doing cases, police brutality cases out in L.A. And if you were from L.A., you knew who to go to if you had a problem with police brutality out in L.A., whether you was a guy on the street or if you had money, or some rich celebrity. And that attorney that used to work for the DA's office at one time that switched over and started working for the people was Johnny L. Cochran. Okay, a lot of people remember him from the O.J. Simpson case. Okay, but Johnny Cochran used to work for the DA's office, started doing police brutality cases, and got a big name for himself, standing up for the people. But the time that he spent working in the DA's office, it was important because it allowed him to have an understanding on the way that the prosecutor was thinking, okay? And as a good litigator, you have to be able to be double-minded. As an investigator, double-minded. Thinking like the prosecutor and the defense, maybe triple-minded. The prosecutor, the defense attorney, and the judge. How they would pursue the case. And I say it's the same thing with journalism, okay? You have to have the ability to look at the whole picture. The pros, the cons. As I was telling Mary Kay at the end of our interview, take it under advisement. Do some research on it. Ask other people their advice. Okay? Now, in Fighting Solutions, I would also say specific enrichment programs need to come directly to black people, and they need to, black people, African Americans, whatever label we want to give ourselves, we need to lobby the state on all levels for direct appropriations. There's really not that many of us left here in the state. It's my theory that the state should be building homes for the black people that are in the state and doing special things for them. Why? The black people are not only black people, they are the state's indigenous people. In them, I'm going to get this out, and it's probably going to be the last thing I'm going to talk about. Their heritage, or the black people, African Americans, their heritage is a heritage which would probably go back, and I think there's more and more evidence to indicate this, to being the so-called mound builder population. How many of us have heard about the mound builder? We learned about them in school. Well, the identity of the so-called mound builders to this day remains shrouded in mystery. However, some black researchers came along. One man, I want to name him, you can go and check his work, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, in his book, They Came Before Columbus. He specifically states, in 1311, the Malian Moors sent out 200 ships, and they crossed the Atlantic, and they got into a heavy current. Some of them went to Mexico, Central America. Some ships went to South America. Now, at first, when Van Sertima said this, the old school people, they looked at him like, have you lost your mind? Are you trying to say Columbus did not discover America? Van Sertima stood strong on his view. And right now, you know, there was big Colossus, I'm gonna finish up here. There's big Colossus Olmec heads with the faces of African people that are like 3,000, 4,000 years old. Now these things have been down there, these things had been found in the 1850s, but this information was suppressed. Why? Because it would require a whole restructuring of the official record as it now stands. I'm one of those people, of the Afrocentric researcher, historian, maybe today lecturer, I encourage you to speak truth to power. No matter what you look like, you will be embraced. People that you didn't think would embrace you, they would embrace you because they will admire the fact that you were bold enough to speak truth to power. And with that, I got to add this one last thing, okay? The state, as a solution, the state has 2 HBCUs, historical black colleges and universities, which were established in the state at a time when blacks had to go to separate schools. The state of West Virginia, as far as all of my research that I've found, had one of the most developed African American segregated school systems anywhere to be found. People would come from out of the state. People like Adam Clayton Powell went to school at West Virginia State. Okay, it was the place to go for black people to go to school at one time, to go to West Virginia. My mother, people in my family went to the segregated school system here in the state. I went to the integrated school system in Pennsylvania, okay? And from listening and watching those black people that came out to educate, that came out to the segregated school systems, I know that they carried a dignity which I respect. And many of the people that come out of the integrated school system that are black, they have a lack of respect for learning, okay? And with that said, I'm going to turn you back over to Mary Kay.
Okay, I am going to open it up for questions. So I'm going to give students a few minutes to ask these questions here before we go on to talk about what we're going to do in class.
Okay.
So, does anybody have questions for John? I have one.
Come on, y'all got to hit me with some questions.
One thing I had a question, because I know you have collected and you have interviewed people about the segregated education in the state, is what have you found that was particularly surprising to you or interesting when you've been talking to people about this?
Well, it's been a bunch of things, okay? I'm going to give you a couple. My mother told me, I don't know how this plays out, but I'm going to put it on the record, right? She told me that when she was going to the public school system, Mom might say this to be like, I didn't say that, right? But she did. She told me that she was taught that John Brown was a black man. And I wondered to myself, no more, I said, what were they, you going to a black school and they're teaching you about John Brown, but they're telling you that John Brown was a black man. And I wondered how that fits in, okay? That was one of the things that was surprising, because the black educators, reportedly was teaching that John Brown was a black man when he wasn't. So I wondered how that played in. Okay, that's one thing. And with the state's segregated school system, as I mentioned earlier, they were perceived as being the best in the nation. If you were black and you wanted to get a good education, go to West Virginia. Not only the old Storer College, okay, which is worth a trip. I haven't been there myself, but it was one of the best places to be educated at. And then all throughout the state, right after slavery, during the Reconstruction period, black people rose up and built their own schools, which is amazing to me, okay? From county to county, I think the first one, I had to read and study this stuff, so county, because I grew up in Pennsylvania. The first one was in Parkersburg, where they built their own school. And they started proliferating. Parkersburg, Clarksburg, Fairmont, all over. So, self-reliance, okay? That's one of the things that I see for black people here in this state, in the segregated school system. They wanted to be educated. And they actually believed that being educated was a way to lift yourself up from being a slave. Because if you remember, and you might not know about this because you guys are young, but it was against the law to teach black people to read. So if there's a deficit, the deficit partly comes from not being able to educate these. Now, not everybody took on that, because we know that it was certain people that risked their lives to be able to teach black people how to read and open the light, put light in their minds and so forth. So you asked me the question. I'm doing my best to answer it. Okay, but those are two things, and there's more. But at this particular time, I can't think of anything else, right? In terms of specifically a segregated school system, some things that are surprising about the segregated school system here in this state. I've been down to West Virginia State. I've been down there to their anybody been to West Virginia State? Anybody? See, me and you are the only ones been, right? Well, as a solution, let's say this, as a solution, I'd like to see West Virginia State or Bluefield State have an off-campus site here in the northern portion of the state. We don't have any of these African American institutions here. Not on the college level. Now on a school level, on a high school level, we do have, for instance, I'm from Fairmont, and we're trying to restore Dunbar High School at this particular time, okay? And Kelly Miller in Clarksburg, you're familiar with Kelly Miller. It's been restored, and they actually, for a period of time, the Board of Education had took Kelly Miller over. And I was like, man, you know what I mean? Black school, and we done lost it, right? But we lost it because black people had no program. I don't know, maybe we were busy chasing girls or having a party or whatever. But what happened was Kelly Miller, the blacks in Clarksburg, the African Americans in Clarksburg, went back in and reclaimed Kelly Miller. So now they're doing programs in Kelly Miller. So what's going on in Kelly Miller should also be going on in Dunbar, in Fairmont. It should be an African American resource or training center, vocational center, along the line of, say, what Booker T. Washington had in store. How many know about Booker T. Washington? Anybody? Okay. He's got that Washington name. But he put forth a program to telling black people, which we gave up his program, but he told us that we should develop ourselves in industry, become educated. Washington had been a slave and come out of slavery and wrote his own book and started schools all over. Okay. You got another question?
That was it.
My question was going to be, like, have you met any white people who were oblivious to the black experience?
You know what? I had a good friend of mine that used to help me change the tire on my motorcycle, right? And when I say good friend, he was a local friend. He wasn't from West Virginia. He was from up in the New England. He's from Massachusetts. And he used to always tell me about how he was colorblind and that he was colorblind. I was like, okay, I'll be working on my bike, man. I appreciate you, you know what I'm saying? But, and him telling me he was colorblind, that was him, you know, I accepted it, but I think the whole idea of someone being colorblind, it's to escape the reality the mundane reality that we have to deal with race, okay? Now, I came out of I told you, I took a class. I missed this and I need to put this on the record. I took a class over in Fairmont back in 1998. I got certified in race, class, and gender. Former WVU football player Kerry Marbury was my instructor for that class. Race, class, and gender at that time, and I questioned it because I was studying Afrocentrism too. Race, class, and gender blended race, class, and gender, mixed it all up with each other, okay? Well, in School of Kemet University, we was told, don't mix race, class, and gender, that we were supposed to deal with race head up, because in mixing the three together, it was an attempt to water race down, because race, you know, when I say race, we're talking about basically slavery, okay? How how the United States really got rich off of the illegal act of slavery. So now you asked me about white people that are able to not be race conscious, okay? In so many ways, and saying that saying that white people are not cannot be race conscious, I'm stumbling with my words here, and I want to make sure I get it out clear and you understand it, right? okay? I say it's good to be authentic, okay? Now, don't discriminate against anyone, but be authentic and be yourself, okay? Now, by him telling me he don't see race, when I'm obviously standing before him, and you can look and see I'm darker than what he is, I mean, part of that might be him trying to appeal to me, but I respect honesty, okay? Someone else, okay, if you had just met me, okay, okay? Be courteous, okay? And courtesy goes a long way because it shows that we are civilized human beings. And that's what we're really, that's what, in the person that I am today, okay, having matured, okay, because the whole construct of race in America, as a child growing in it, up in it, as a child having experienced discrimination in the public school system and so forth, by the time I got around 18, 19, I was very angry. I didn't know why, okay? And it actually took about 10 years of intense study on my part to get a better grip and understanding of what was going on, and to the point where I could be able to articulate it and be confident in who and what I am. I say to you that the public school system made a mistake in not equipping black men and black people. But I don't necessarily think it was designed to do that from the beginning. That's why I say that it's necessary for us to document, articulate our own experience, and also transmit that legacy on to other people. I say that we should be looking for the scholar, the young scholar that is willing to challenge the status quo as it stands, if it's wrong. Okay? And I hope I've been able to answer your question, my man. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Okay, you all, we are at fall break. And that means that you have no class on Thursday. You guys know this, but we do have something still due, and it needs to be dropped. And it needs to be dropped either on the assignment. You can upload things, or I just want to go over the procedure again. If I can find the campus here. And let me, if you want to call up eCampus on the computer you're on, and I will pull up this assignment again. The computer's gone to sleep. And you might write a couple of things down here if you have questions about this, or please ask me if anything I say makes you be like, what? Yeah. Please ask. But if you call up the assignment or the class list, and you look at what you're doing. First thing that is due on Thursday is your edited 2 to 4 minute interview. Okay. Number 1, if we go into the instructions for syncing, if you follow it all the way down, it's not just instructions for syncing. All the way down here at the end, there should be instructions on how to edit. When you go to export this, you go to export media, and in the format is H.264. All right, I know I said that, but that is actually not written in these instructions. I will add it right after this. When does that have to happen by? The scheduled interview. Okay. I'll send out an email to you guys later today, but one of the things that needs to happen now, first of all, does everybody have a contact for that second interview? Everybody knows who they're interviewing, at least?
Not everybody.
No, okay. What school do you have?
Charleston.
Okay.
Down in Charleston, I think.
Okay. Okay. All right. Then, we need you pretty quickly here to set up an actual time to go. We need a date and time when you're going to actually be on site, on location, interviewing the person you're going to interview. We need to move you forward in that, so we need to know it. And it's in your syllabus, but I will write you an email after this and remind you when you need that by. But it's coming up. You need to actually, in that conversation you are having, where you're doing the pre-interview and the questions, there should be a question in there about what are good days of the week for you so that we can come. And when would you be comfortable for us to come to your house to interview you? Okay?
And so also what this means is you guys need to talk to your partner and the people in your group so you know what their availability is. So you definitely, all this needs to be done in coordination with the folks in your group, right? It can't just be on one person. You have to pull your weight in the team and have to make sure you're constantly communicating so that everybody knows what's going on. And I know this is a lot, so if you have any questions about any aspect of it, the tech aspect, when things are due, we have 2 resources and we're happy to help. Please come and see us during office hours or email us.
Yes, I was here all day Monday, nobody came.
Yeah.
So if you have questions, please, come see me.
Yes.
That's why I'm here for you.
So Thursday, we're handing in our summary of the phone call along with the questions that we're gonna ask in the actual interview.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Plus your first edit of your interview by midnight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, good? Questions? Have a nice break.
Yes.
I really enjoyed you guys.
Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure. I very much got you. It's a pleasure to meet you. So appreciate that.
You do history, right?
I do history. I do public history. So I just was hired last year, so I teach classes on historic preservation, on like interpreting history for the public. So like what you're talking about was perfect, right? You know, it's like how it's presented, like what in museums, basically how history is presented to the public, and also issues of like preserving history, collecting materials for archives and things like that. So a lot of our students are people who go in museums and historical societies, at historic sites, that kind of thing.
Now, here in this area, we really don't have
So on Thursday, you're telling me.
history or like for instance,
Okay, you guys, I
downtown,
just looked it
they
up
have
on
like
the syllabus.
a
It is
special
Tuesday. I need a date from
geological
you.
room
You're
for
going to
you
do
to carry the history. I think we need something.
You mentioned that John Henry Museum, that's no longer.
That's no longer here.
I had saw some reference to it, and I was like, I hadn't heard of that.
Yes,
So that you worked with the gentleman who.
Ed Cabell, he's got books.
Okay.
He's got books that he wrote on the coal camp, black people in West Virginia. A lot of times, my grandparents, my grandfathers, they came here as coal miners and worked in the coal mines. And so that's how a lot of black people
Came to there,
came to the area,
yeah.
salt mines and the coal mines.
Yeah.
That's what I.
Yes, we need that museum because it encourages us to collect the data because we have a place where it can be a platform.
Part of the reason I came to this project is when I first came, they had an event, and I was just trying to learn from the locals, because I'm new to West Virginia, you know, I don't know anything about the area, so I was trying
We can
to,
get all that information.
you know, make contact with local historical groups. So the museum downtown had Charlene Marshall giving a speech, so I came and heard Mrs. Marshall talk, and she was talking about her research on black schools in the area. And she had mentioned that a lot of the records had been destroyed after integration. I was like, oh dear, that's, you know, so her kind of talking to me, thinking, well, this might be a good project for students to start kind of build on the research that's been done.
Pieces of
Yeah.
there, you just
And
have
there's
to,
scattered,
you have
yeah.
to have to go and connect them back. And that's why I was saying it would be a good idea if we could have like an off-campus site for
Yeah.
black
Center
historical
of
black
some sort,
colleges.
yeah, especially if you think of Morgantown being kind of a center for education or in this area. Yeah.
Now, we do have the Center for Black Culture over there. However, and I have a friend over there. However, I don't necessarily think the Center for Black Culture is sufficient in and of itself.
It's sort of more geared towards students, you know, sort of more geared
And
towards
it's run by
students.
WVU, and it's sort of, you know, I
Yeah,
think we
it's
need
not
something.
autonomous.
Yeah, I think we need something outside of WVU. WVU wants to contribute to it, but we need to have something.
Something where the controls the community members, yeah.
You know, you have the same type of things in areas where you have police brutality. They want to, oftentimes, the citizens want to set up police review boards, and the policing establishment, they're against it. They don't want that.
Yeah.
You know, you have the same thing in housing communities where the tenants, they want to set up a tenants organization, but the managers, they, no. And they don't, because it puts an oversight on what they're doing.
Yeah.
And if they're not doing things 100% right, you know, they get called on.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, yeah.
You know Crystal Frazier?
You know what's funny about, I haven't met her, but I'm in her old office.
You met her, she's not here no
No,
more?
she moved to Nashville. She got a new job, so she left right when I came. And so like, it's funny, I get all her phone calls because I have her phone number too. But I didn't, like, you know, what basically we don't currently have an African American historian, like someone studying African American.
So you don't have an African American historian right now?
And hopefully we'll get one this year, but they haven't approved the job search yet.
How long has Crystal been gone? I didn't know she
She's
was
been gone a
gone.
full year. And she hasn't been replaced yet.
She just got a better position?
Yeah, I know it's better for her because I think her husband was like in Tennessee. Like I think her put her family together, but like it's huge. I've only heard wonderful things. I've emailed her for a little bit, but like, I mean,
Okay.
it's sort of like horrific to me to think we have a history department and no like black history. Like nobody researching after teaching, able to teach those classes. So like right now.
I wonder if Crystal ever did any video work from her
What
last
she
president.
did. I think if she.
I interviewed her one time because
Did you?
they had something
Okay.
on campus with around the
I know
Trayvon
she
Martin.
did a lot of research on like civil rights activists.
If you come up on any of her stuff, I'd like to see her presentations. I never got a chance to sit in on any of her classes or anything like that.
Okay, yeah. If I find anything, I'll let you know. But yeah, she was a huge loss.
You got a card or something?
Yeah, I do.
I have a friend of mine that used to be a professor here at WVU.
Who's that?
Jose Pimenta Bates. He's a Moor.
What did he teach?
He taught African American studies. He left here and he's at, I think he's at Berea now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's at Berea now. But I'd actually like to see him come in and speak on the omitted history, on the omitted Moorish history. He wrote a book called Children of Othello. WVU didn't renew his contract and he left the room.
Where's the
I think Berea's in there.
Okay. I've heard the name, I'm not sure. Well, I
Well-
have a meeting to get to, but I can't get.
I'm gonna get on that.
Hey, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And what we'll do is we'll doctor this thing up and we'll get to you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'll have to go back and review it because I'm seeking to polish myself up to make better presentations, and being able to speak here before your class.